Hi, you've reached Joe Golden at 330. Or please leave your message and I will return your call. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
Welcome to My Name is Nobody, a podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of the Cleveland music scene and beyond. In this episode, I speak with musician Joe Golden, guitar player for Mo Mojo, bass player for Idolos, and self-proclaimed solder jockey at Earthquaker Devices. Joe also spent a brief time as the guitar player for the Pretenders. I got Joe Golden on the phone to speak with him about his bands, his job, and his time with Chrissy Hynde and the Pretenders. This is Joe Golden, and these are his stories. See the light from the view, and the concept of fall. It's to run from the fool, like you will be. Joe Golden, how are you, my friend?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. I'm good. It's Saturday here in Akron, and it was supposed to be rainy, and now it looks like it's kind of beautiful out. So I'm having a good day.
Funny thing, I'm way up in Madison by the lake, and it's Saturday here too.
It is? You're kidding me.
No, and the sun is out and blue skies.
I mean, did you see the weather? Was it supposed to be rainy, or what's going on?
No, I think maybe this afternoon or tomorrow.
I did have a gig we had just spoken about. That I had a gig that was canned for today at the Cleveland Yacht Club, and we also aren't moving into play, indoors. So it's like at least they're being serious about keeping us outdoor.
Right.
So what's up with you, man? How's everything going with my name and everything that you're doing?
A lot of good responses. People seem to like the interviews. A lot of people asking to be on the show. I've got a bunch of stuff scheduled for the next couple of weeks. Some really great people that I'm excited about. And yeah, it's all good, man. So Joe Golden, you are the guitar player for Mo Mojo.
Yep.
You play bass in Idolos, which is the band we heard in your intro.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. It was awesome. I was like, whoa, that sounds pretty good.
You also did some time with Chrissy Hynde and the Pretenders that I want to talk about.
Yeah, I had a little stint with her, and I would love to rehash some of that just so I remember it.
Right. And your job is actually interesting to me and other musicians because you are employed by Earthquaker Devices, correct?
Yeah, for about the past 8 years, I've worked. That's my day gig, is building stomp boxes.
That's awesome, man. Boutique, hand-wired guitar effect pedals and stuff. Are you guys able to stay open and busy during the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, it's been an interesting changeover. It really has. But I have, we've all 45 of us have been gainfully employed since the shutdown. And we've since have kind of retooled how we do production so that instead of it being in-house, it's in-house now. You're literally at home, and everybody's kind of carrying the load on their own desks at home, and then we kind of just make trips to the shop to make sure everything's going smooth. And then there's a core group there that really handles the day-to-day operations and, of course, boxing, shipping, all that. Yeah, but we're doing it. And believe it or not, I mean, this is something that I think has been kind of covered through this last 6 months or so, is that, our particular niche product is still selling because people are at home, and it's on the lower end of the audio equipment price, just because stomp boxes are, a little bit of a more novelty feature to some people. So the prices are low. So people are at home like, hey, I'm bored. I want some new sounds. And they're pulling the trigger, So we're very thankful that we can, first of all, feed all of our families and stuff, but still keep doing what we love, what we love to do. So
Absolutely.
we're fortunate.
Yeah, that's great, man. And they make good stuff too.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
It's definitely a little, like you said, on the lower price point as far as boutique pedals are concerned. There's some like Wampler and stuff that are crazy expensive, but your quality is up there.
Yeah, thanks. And it's one of those things that as this company, I mean, the origins of the company, I work for a husband and wife team, and the husband, Jamie Stillman, who founded the company, he was doing this stuff out of his basement by himself for, I would say, the first maybe 3 or 4 years, around 2006 or so. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and he finally had to outsource and find friends that could help him build stuff. So that's when he, made his first official kind of hirings. And then at that point, his wife, Julie Robbins, she was working like a high, like kind of profile bank job, and she just, wasn't really her cup of tea. And she's so unbelievably talented at business and marketing and just understanding how to run a company that she was really the catalyst for taking that pressure off of Jamie, stepping in with a lot of fervor because she didn't have her day gig anymore, and pretty much molding the company into, what it has become today. So those two are, really the secret sauce. And then as they kept adding employees, I was in the second round of hirings, which I guess would have been around, it's been 8 years. So yeah, I guess maybe around 2012 or so, I made my way in there, and they had just changed buildings from where he was working at his home in the basement. And they were like, hey, we need some floor space. So they finally got their first outside of the house building. And I was one of the hires during that period. So maybe like employee number, I don't know, 6 or 7 or something like that. It's a really cool story. I mean, just being part of it and working with, anybody you work with every day becomes your family to some degree, but it really felt natural for me because everybody there is so artistic and so creative and so funny and so brilliant and snarky, which I love. And so it just felt like a home, and it was just really neat to see something kind of come up out of the ground that was like, hey, this is like our company, and it feels like that. They don't, run it like, hey, our boss. It's definitely like a community, which is, and the culture of it is really awesome to be a part of.
Did you like study electronics to like? I mean, is soldering and all that stuff something you've always been good at, or is that like something?
No, I've never been good at anything, but I've definitely noticed that I pick stuff up after trying it many, many times and failing, and that's the same thing with electronics. My journey with electronics started before Earthquaker. I was just really interested in audio electronics, being a guitar player. I was collecting amps at the time, and I had a pretty good collection for somebody, who was in their like younger 20s or whatever. And they would always go down. The amps would go down, and I kept shucking out bucks, like buying vintage amps and then immediately getting them and having to like gut it a little bit to get it up to snuff, and got tired of shucking out the bread for that. So I just decided maybe I'd try to get in there and fix something, and that's where it started. But the high voltages that are present in tube amps, which I prefer tube amps, so that's what I had mostly. The high voltages kind of scared me a little bit. For good reason. Stuff is dangerous. So I went to pedal or lower voltage, small signal stuff, and that was really cool because I could burn stuff up and not hurt myself and learn what I was doing. And I recommend it to anybody who is if you've ever had an idea that you wanted to build anything. Even if it's an answering machine kit off of eBay that's new old stock, I recommend that you just get into it. You just jump right in. It may work, it may not, but with that experience, you're on your way to being able to either make your own creations or understand the broken stuff that you have around the house. So that's my journey, was like literally utilitarian, which is mostly how I pick skills up, is like, I need to get this done. How do I do it? I guess I got to do it,
Right.
But yeah, and then I just fell in love. And I think my attachment to the company was I was repairing people's amps in town. At that point, I had like moved on from like small signal stuff and was working with tube amps and guitar players, hanging with my guitar buddies. And I was recording at a studio, and that's no longer in existence in Akron anymore, but it's Tangerine Studios. There's a fellow named Ben Vehorn who owned that studio for a long time, and he had me over doing some tracking on a record of somebody's, and it was it was like the craziest thing. We just kind of like, bumped into each other. We were buddies, and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "Hey, I brought some pedals I've been building," and he checked them out, and he was working for Earthquaker at the time. So I think when they needed a new hire round, they were like, "Hey, this guy can solder. He seems competent." So that kind of pushed it a little forward. And then the strange thing about that particular day is that when I was in the studio with Ben, there was a Les Paul guitar sitting there that you could use, and I fell in love with this guitar, like tracking with it. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's my buddy's Robbins. He's a really good guy, but he doesn't like the guitar, so it's just been sitting here as like a studio guitar." And I was like, "Wow, do you think he'd sell it, or do you mind if I ask if he'll sell it?" And he's like, "No, man, go for it. It barely gets played." And it was this beautiful gold top Les Paul. In fact, here, I'm gonna go grab it real quick. Rich, this will make more sense when you get the video, but yeah. So this Les Paul, which I love, and it's just like a custom shop reissue. But I was really looking for something kind of chunky on the neck, something that had some thickness, and I was just smitten. So I got the dude's number, and I went over to his house, and he was like, "Oh, cool, I got this Les Paul for sale, yada, yada, yada. Cool, I bought it." And then we got to talking, and I needed a place to move in. My lease was up on where I was currently living. And Robin, the guy I bought the guitar from, was like, "Hey, that's funny. I'm actually moving to state college with my fiance at the time, I believe, to follow her career, but we're going to rent this place out." And so I ended up getting a guitar and getting a place to live in one fell swoop. And
that's a great day.
It was a great day. So I moved my laboratory into the basement of the place, and I was building stuff and having, really enjoying myself with it. It was really fun. I was teaching music at the time, so I had like mornings to myself, and my roommate at the time, he was working day shift. So I had, I could crank up in the morning and make all kinds of hideous racket. And one day, my roommate, his son was having a birthday party, and some of his friends came over, and one of them worked at Earthquaker and saw that I was in the basement making pedals. So I think those two kind of things cemented my like put me on the radar, so to speak, as like solder jockeys when they needed help. And so that's how I got hired in. And I have no electronics degree background whatsoever. I'm YouTube, went to the school of YouTube on most of it. And then from there, you just pick stuff up. And once, it's like anything else, you get your feet wet and then it takes off.
So back when you were a kid, I'm assuming you started playing guitar as a kid.
I did. And the origin story of that is pretty much, I was a late bloomer, as with most things, but I was a late bloomer when it came to learning art or music. I went to a Catholic school growing up from K to 8. Ooh. And we didn't have like a solid art and music program. Though they were there, they just weren't really focus type education. So I was always artistic. I came from people that are musicians. My mother and father are both musicians. And they didn't press it on me or anything, but around 14, when I was a freshman, it just like bit down hard that summer before my freshman high school year. Kind of plunking on my mom's acoustic, and she was the one who showed me my first chords and also held the bar, like, "Hey, you can't learn anymore until you can play an F bar chord," and gave me kind of a stringent like regimen to get into. And I started playing it, and the acoustic was tough to play at first, even for somebody who was like preteen or teen. Right. And yeah, it was just like one day I was like, "Man, it'd be cool if I had electric." She's like, "Been waiting for you to ask for a long time. There's one under the bed for you." So I literally just went from that question into her room and pulled out an electric. It was like a Squire 2 Strat, black Squire 2 humbucker equipped Strat, and that was my first guitar. And that's how it all like started. I was, and at that age when you're 14 or so, you're almost kind of behind most of the people that have begun either with band or if they're doing a rock instrument. I'd say like 12, 13 is when it really starts to like click. So it was like I kind of didn't know how to play anything when I got into high school, and I had to be the guy with like the Marshall amp, so I was cool enough to be in a band even though I sucked,
I understand. I suck too, but I got a lot of nice gear, and I'm a really good accountant. It's the only reason why people have me in their band.
You can run the books. I like it.
That's great. So I mean, that's awesome that your parents were musicians. You know, like that certainly helps to have someone always around who can show you something when you're stuck. I
Yeah.
was the opposite, man. There is nobody in my family that is a musician.
Okay.
My younger brother strums on his guitar. I mean, we had a band together for a while. He was like a rhythm guitar player. He was in a couple other bands, but now he just basically strums acoustic guitars in his living room for his kids. But
So he's happy. So he's happy with his music career.
yes, right, right. He lives out in the middle of nowhere, and they're raising chickens and ducks now.
It's funny how it's that neighbors over the neighbor's fence kind of concept. It doesn't matter what you do. Always something always looks good over there.
Yeah, right. Right. Well, I want nothing to do with chickens or ducks, man. So
The eating's pretty good, but the rest of it sounds like something I'd have to read a book on.
right, he can stay on that side of the fence. I'm good with that. Stay
So,
over there.
was he in bands with you ever, or was
We
there
had
an
we had one band together called Driving by Braille.
That's a great name.
Yeah, it was kind of like a punk rock and roll type thing, I guess.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
that's also like back when I started. Like, okay, so '94 is when I started playing guitar. Obviously, the only thing you can play when you're just learning is like power chords and punk rock, and the energy and the time and
Hmm.
the timing of it is like rife with success. You can't go wrong. Like, so it just makes sense, I think, to be in those bands, especially when you're younger, because it's a good vehicle to get your chops together.
Right. And now that I'm in my 40s and been playing for 20 years, that's still the only thing I have enough talent to play.
Oh, come on! I've seen you play. You can't pull the wool over my eyes. And you're
You've,
you're an excellent bass player, so you must have picked up some tricks here and there.
yeah, some little tricks over the years, but
There should be a little bit of, to me, like classic metal and everything, any punk stuff that comes after it, because to me, like that attitude, like the punk attitude is great through the '80s. I mean, it's the snarl. I love all that stuff, but there's something kind of mystic and kind of spooky about old metal, and I like that when it's in my like punk rock. When you like get a little bit of like, like even early Priest to me has a little bit of a punk vibe sometimes.
sure.
Just not in the context when you think of punk rock like the Sex Pistols or something, but it had that kind of energy and that shuffle that was big in the '70s too. The that thing. It doesn't show up in punk rock, but it's kind of the same energy and like also the biggest middle finger you can do, I guess, kind of in music when you're strutting across the stage with your leather pants and bullet belt. Like you want to have a good rhythm to do that too.
Right, right.
Well, that's cool. Most of my bands in high school were like, my first one was I think called Hang Baby, which is a terrible name. You're always naming bands when you're that young to shock your parents. And, if you can't tell your grandma, then it's a cool name.
Right.
And that was the first band. Yeah, that was mine anyway.
Well, Driving by Braille, I mean, by then I was already in my 20s, In fact, John was married, had a kid. But
Wow.
yeah,
Cool.
my first band was I did a hardcore band called Pale Creation, which we made a record back in the late 80s, early 90s, and yeah, played some gigs, and then I left, and they continued on to make records and stuff, and we were, I mean, at the beginning stages of the Cleveland hardcore scene. We were one of the first bands.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's we had we've brushed on this just in conversation before, but I feel like I work with a lot of people that I were not only around, I think, during the advent of that around Akron more than Cleveland, but I'm sure that there's a bit of estuary there for sure. It's only 45 minutes away. So I'm sure that those era bands also teamed with Akron bands that were doing similar stuff and just to play shows. And there's not a whole lot at that time there's not a whole lot of places to play in Akron at that time and ever really, honestly. And we're blessed to have any of them, but like there's not a ton. So I think a lot of the Akron bands had to go up to Cleveland during that time to play with y'all. But I'm always amused at like the stories I hear about those bands because I whiffed. I totally missed that whole scene. I was doing something completely different and maybe just a little. I'm going to be 40 in a couple weeks, so I think maybe I just missed it a little bit.
Well, you didn't miss much.
Well, those brain cells aren't going to kill themselves, Richard.
That's right. I'm going to be 50 soon, and I'm going to tell you right now. Right now, I'm making the most money I ever made. I've
That, yeah.
I've been that kid that's over in Europe and's been there for 10 days, and you have zero money, nothing to eat, and your gig just got canceled. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, not for me. I have a mortgage now. But
Yeah, I'm glad that there's at least it offered some stability somehow, because you chase this music thing like with like the most unabashed like fervor for your passion. You're like, I'm gonna do this, and it beats you up so much that you're on the ropes at times. Where like maybe I shouldn't be doing this. It really questions, it
right.
has the ability. I mean, everything in life does, I guess, but I definitely have experienced it more with music than with like my eating habits or something. Like I had a dream to play music, and it has beat me up to do it, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Right, for sure. So speaking of which, your main gig is playing guitar for Mo Mojo.
Yes, I've been really fortunate enough to actually rejoin this band. I started playing with them. Oh boy, this is like so long ago I can almost barely remember. But I feel like it was 2002 or so, maybe. My dad, who's an exceptional guitar player, his name's Joe Smith, which sounds like John Doe, but his name is actually Joe Smith. And he's like a blues R&B guitar player, and that's what he did for a career. He wasn't a day gig, a 50-50 guy. He was always doing music. And he was pretty much playing in this band called Mo Mojo, which was an Akron band, is an Akron band. And it was fronted by, at the time, and still is, by the woman who created the band, Jen Maurer. And she plays accordion, or button box accordion, and sings all the songs, but she's a multi-instrumentalist. I've never seen her play an instrument that she couldn't just kind of shred on. So she's one of those types. And she started the band with a man named Scott Gann. Scott Texas Gann is what he went by, but he was from down in Texas, and he had family members that kind of brought him up playing Zydeco, obviously on the bass side there, or on the golf side. And so I think he came up, they had a musical rapport. She started the band, gigged it for a while. My dad somehow dropped into playing with them. And then my dad kind of got a little bit like, he just like how all bands are, where you just kind of get a little disenchanted with something in life or with the project itself or the direction of it. He bailed. And by bailing, he was like, hey, I got some gigs. You should cover these for me. And then I covered them for him, and I just didn't leave for like 10 years. And I did find like a musical family there. It's highly improvisational music. Zydeco is as most people know, is Cajun Creole, New Orleans style music, and it has a tinge to a more rootsy type of thing. It's not like the funk or even the R&B that you'd hear from New Orleans, but more of the rural music that's around the swamps, the bayou. And I kind of fell in love with the fact that it has this beautiful French element to it, but it has a lot of rhythms that you would hear in normal blues or R&B, or really, the origins of that to somewhat be like, kind of music from Cuba and stuff infiltrated there. So the estuary and like that whole melting pot concept is very present in that music. Like you have out of tune fiddle, and out of tune accordion, but then you also have these cool like Afrobeat rhythms in there. And I kind of got into it, and it's not hard on the brain power. Like the music is meant to be simple because it's dance related music, which I also was like really respected. I was like, man, this Mo Mojo thing is pretty cool. And I stuck it out, developed great relationships with the band. It's kind of a moving cast, it's just kind of a revolving cast of characters. So instead of having like a set number of people in your band, it has like maybe 15 and maybe 6 go out at all times. So that, and you're well aware of this. This is how you keep a band working if people have busy lives and schedules. And so I was just digging on it, and I was like resident guitar for a long time, and I was teaching music at the time, mainly private lessons and then jazz band stuff in a community where I grew up, which is Wadsworth, Ohio. And I was kind of reaching my limit on like just, gigging 3 or 4 nights a week, teaching 65 students a week. And I was up to like 10 years of that. So I was just getting kind of smoked. I was burnt, and decided, okay, I'm going to jump to the pedal thing, that's when I made the jump to Earthquaker Devices.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I scaled back because Mo Mojo was doing international touring, and my schedule didn't permit me to be gone for months on end at that particular time, which is kind of a bummer looking back on it because I would have liked the travel. But I am a bit of a homebody, so who knows? It's the other side of the fence thing. But I definitely, long story short, and that's how I kind of like lucked into that band through like a sub gig, stayed for a long time, left, worked at the pedal thing for about 8 years. And I'd say about a year and a half ago, I went back to Mo Mojo to play a little bit more with them doing, and same thing, just kind of, it was a gateway thing where you just sub a gig and then you start sticking around because you're enjoying it. We did some cool stuff. We went to Mexico, and then of course local touring and some regional touring, but the Mexico thing was cool. We were just ambassadors of music for the State Department pretty much. And it was really neat to just go down there and kind of feel like you're a big deal just because it's being hosted by the government.
Right.
But
it is kind of a big deal,
Yeah, well, you're traveling, you're traveling down to like central Mexico in like an armored van, they protect their assets, I guess, but it was a beautiful trip, and the people there were amazing, and it was really enlightening personally for me, just like socially, it was really cool. I mean, obviously the climate of our country is, there's been talk of wall building and all these different things, so to me it was really
I heard a
cool.
rumor about that, yeah.
Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
I read it somewhere too, and I don't tend to jump. I don't get stoked to debate politics, but I was really interested in seeing a non fed to me perspective and just taking in the information myself. And I mean, you can't get a good gist for what's going on in like a couple weeks or whatever, but man, the time spent there really was eye-opening, and but basically I came away with it with like everybody in Mexico, especially the people the people that are living there, they're not uptight. They're not uptight and spun up like they can be in the United States. I'm not saying everybody is, but there isn't that weird kind of insistency on getting your point across or being right. It was just more, I would say, I guess more welcoming overall. It felt comfortable. I didn't feel awkward. It didn't feel dangerous where I was. So it was just one of those things that I was happy to dispel the stuff I had been reading by actually seeing it. So that was really cool to get back with them and do that. And now that all bands are somewhat furloughed, depending on how you're gigging and whatever, we made a record, and I think we'll probably put it out at some point. But the band constantly changes just because lives change. So, Yep, Mo Mojo, that was that. Then I did a thing with Mark Leach, and I still play with him, but we're just not actively doing anything. He's a gentleman from Barberton, Ohio, and one of the most talented singers that I've ever worked with. He's just like a natural talent, And so that was a gig that I was kind of doing when I wasn't doing that Mo Mojo thing. And then, things kind of slowed down a little bit. He lived at the time in Nashville, so there was a lot more kind of him coming up to play gigs, and that was wearing on him. And now he's moved back, which is, I think, working out for him. He's actually getting married in the spring. So he's, doing other things, but he's making great records still. But without the touring, I'm just not much of he doesn't really need me right now. But
yeah.
I enjoyed the heck out of that gig. It was really, and I'll do it again. I mean, I know we'll fire back up at some point, but he played really great. I mean, country, this is something that I didn't grow up with, really. We didn't listen to country music, and in the modern country that had kind of seized the day, I wasn't really hip to when I joined the band. I just know blues licks. So they were like, this guy, it's an easy gravitate. You can gravitate towards playing this modern country if you have a rock blues background. You don't have to be like an old-timey picker or anything and know that stuff, which is the cool stuff. But you know what I mean? Like, you can just have a rock background and all of a sudden play in this new genre of music that you hadn't touched. So I was stoked. I was like, this is great. I can just jump right in. All the guys in the band were always super, super great. I mean, best people to tour with, best people to get life advice from, everything. So that's really, I'm sure you've talked about it before with other people, is like the gig triangle. If there's like a triangle and the top is like the cash, the people, and the place, if any of those two corners are there, then I'm there probably for the gig. If if not, then I'll maybe have some questions or concerns about doing it. But it was a shoe-in to have good people. The venues were always nicer, I would say bigger venues, so that was great. There was always opening slots, so you're playing for somebody else's captured big crowd, which never feels bad,
No, right.
So I was very happy to do that. So it was nice to take the Zydeco sabbatical, do the country thing, and then now going back to the Zydeco thing a little bit when I can. And same thing with Idolos. That's a guy I used to work with at Earthquaker Devices. He's gone on to another career at this point, but I couldn't afford to lose him. He's just that cool of a dude. And so, sometimes you have projects with people to just make sure that they pop up in your live more. And that dude is Nick Zito is his name. He writes all the music, and then is kind enough to teach it to us and then let us kind of craft our own parts as well. So that's how I ended up with the Idolos gig, which is mainly a studio type band. We haven't played a ton of live shows, and obviously now not at all, but it's really cool to play like heavier rock music that I normally wouldn't touch.
Right.
And that was part of it.
You guys put out that record, Veils.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
and that was the end of last year, right?
Yeah, let's go with that. I feel like it was. It's funny how that stuff goes so fast, but I think I've been playing with them for about 2 years, so it would make sense that about halfway through that we released the first one. And you know how it goes. You make a record, and then it releases by the time you forget about it, really.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we made a record, Lazy Bastards. I think I gave you that CD.
Yeah.
And broke up.
Yeah, that's how it goes a lot of times.
Well, it's terrible for me because I invested all this money in printing CDs. I've got boxes and boxes of CDs in my music room that are just sitting there.
Well, maybe it'll rehash because that was you were playing guitar in that project, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was some twangy telly playing. I mean, maybe it'll have a resurgence as they often do. Death rattle, I like to call it.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, would you like 15, 20 more CDs?
Yeah, I've been looking for some. I always just think like coasters, or what do you use them for?
So you put out this record at the end of last year, and that's about the time that I met you, the end of the summer or whatever. And I saw that you were putting out this record. You made a post about it, and I went and listened to it, and I was like, I really, really like that record a lot.
Thanks. It's not bad. It was our first time out, and I think their third record as a band. So I joined. I actually did the same thing. I joined to kind of carry them through like a time when they didn't have a bass player. I played bass in that band. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those deals where like I just ended up staying because I liked it, and I liked the people in the band, and they're excellent musicians, and they communicate in a way that's different than a lot of the other bands that like where I'm doing music by numbers or charts or Nashville System or something, where the language is on that level. This is more of an organic thing where you use your ears primarily, and then like some of my music bone kicks in and I analyze it after the fact, but it's really like driven by playing and writing by ear, which should be always the end game, but it's just nice to take a little break from the standard kind of, all right, we got 3 hours of music, what do you want to hear, into this more creative thing. And I'm glad you liked the record. I thought it came out really good considering we had only been playing for a few months at that point, and we did most of it live. Though plenty of overdubs, but the drums and the bass and guitar were all tracked live, and then we did associated stuff. So we were just happy that it came off.
Yeah, it sounds great. And that's the first track. It's the one I played in your intro, and
I like that, being part of a record always. I mean, a lot of the bands I play in were, cover type bands or bands that you would hire for an event or something. And so you're not ever getting in a studio and making records. So and I think everybody, when they first, especially if it's kind of organic and you learn music from your friends in the community and in school or whatever you're jamming in a band, it's just all about creativity. And so getting back to that, where you just have a project that like, you're shaping this clay to try to make something cool. And that's just, it's a different energy that goes into that, like where most of the other gigs where the energy is just getting in your car and getting there and setting up, tearing down,
right.
Being present for it, trying to keep a good skippy attitude going. And this was more like, hey, let's get in here and get a little personal with each other as far as how we write and how we communicate, and the, you know, sometimes the fruit on the branch is a little bit withered a little bit, but sometimes you get a big fat juicy orange out of it and you're like, this is awesome.
Right.
This is fun. It like, you know, it just reinvigorates why you even decided to do music after being a gig slave, so to speak, for a long time.
Exactly. So you spent time playing guitar for Chrissy Hynde and the Pretenders. I this wouldn't be a proper video if I didn't ask you how that came about, and have you tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I was just very, very fortunate. Like you know, I think most of the things in music just kind of dump in your lap, and this is no different. The story goes, I have played with this gal over the years, Rachel Roberts. She's a fantastic singer-songwriter, instrumentalist, musician, living in Berea right now, but she was in Akron. And excuse me, at the time, she lived with me. Like I had a roommate, and she was the girlfriend of the roommate.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard her playing all this music, and I was like, hey, you know, you're really good. We should like jam. And then we started a band, and I played with her for a number of years playing bass. And one day, she just came over to my house, like randomly. We had already moved residence and split up that kind of house. But she came over one day really earlier than I would normally have any of my music friends come over. And she said,
like before noon?
It was before noon. It was.
Wow.
And this is, you know, I'm 26 or something at the time. So like, you know, teaching second shift and stuff. So this is really odd that somebody's here at before noon. And she wakes me up, like literally I'm in bed, and my roommate lets her in. She comes up, knocks on my bedroom door, and she's like, hey, and I'm like, hey, you know, what are you doing? Nice to see you. You know, want some coffee or whatever? And she's like, hey, I got a really excellent gig for you if you're available. Chrissy Hynde is playing at the Akron Civic Theater tonight for a Democratic kind of function. And this was, you know, I think it was, boy, I'm really bad with the dates, but it's like 2008, maybe 2006, somewhere around in there.
Mm-hmm.
No, it would have been, boy, maybe.
It'd be 2008 because it was Obama, our DNC thing, right?
It was the DNC, exactly. That's exactly what it was. So she was like, you know, Chrissy's in town, and Chrissy is from the Akron area. I think most people around here know that, but maybe somebody else listening might not know. But she's a native of Akron or Cuyahoga Falls.
Mm-hmm.
So what ended up happening is she was back in town to, she had a business here, a restaurant that she was kind of, you know, running from wherever she was living at the time. And so she came in to check on operations. And then also, I think her folks were kind of getting up there in age. And so she was just kind of, you know, steadying around that situation. And so she was home. And she needed somebody to back her up, just one person. And my friend Rachel punted me the gig, and I literally went to the bathroom because I just woke up, got in the shower, went out the door, met Rachel and Chrissy at Chrissy's apartment in Highland Square of Akron, Ohio, brought my acoustic guitar, and she just ran tunes. Like she ran like three or four tunes, you know. And we didn't talk about music or anything, she just ran them. And for some of it, I had a guitar in my hand, kind of just tracking it. But I'm one of those people that I tend to not analyze music the first time I listen to it. I tend to just kind of listen to it. And so I was just, you know, checking out her tunes or whatever. And it's Chrissy Hynde, so you're kind of like, whoa, this is weird. I'm like, it's 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, and I'm here. Okay. And then it was like, cool, you ready to go to the gig? We got like sound check in like an hour. And I'm like, well, all right, let's do that. So we went down there and sat around all day kind of hanging out with Chrissy, and she was really excellent to me. There was like some people in the orchestra pit taking pictures, and she's kind of, you know, not really a fan of that, especially during a sound check. You know, it's not like you're up on the stage performing. So she was like, hey, you know, photos after, you know, when the show's going. And boy, I'll tell you what, like her booming through the Civic Theater, telling somebody to not take photos, I definitely like, I think my G string on my guitar just almost broke itself, you know, like it was like, bing. It was just a moment where I was like, this woman commands some attention and knows how to handle herself. But she was excellent to me. We went on stage, played these songs. I didn't know the songs really. I mean, she didn't want to run them or rehearse them after just showing me them. So I just kind of improvised through it. And when we were up there, there was a moment where she got through the first tune and she was like, feels pretty good up here with Joe. And and that made me feel very happy, and also took some of the pressure off it. And then that's how that opened up. Is like, she wasn't doing the Pretenders thing at the time. She was playing with this gentleman named JP. They had like a little record project and her solo records. So she wasn't really doing the Pretenders thing, but I just kind of kept in contact, and that's how it lifted off. And I didn't spend a long time touring with them or anything like that. It was like just doing little jaunt type gigs and stretches, and it didn't last as long as I wanted to. But also, I'm not a real road dog. As I got older, I wanted less of the long-term road and more of like, give me 2 weeks, and then I want to come home.
2 weeks is a long time for me.
But she was awesome. 2 weeks is to me, like, that's about as long as I can go for my own comfortability. But yeah, we've all done like crazy tours where it's like, what? I can't. How long? What? Another week? Really? Can't.
Yeah.
But that's how that shook out, and I think between that happening and all these other local bands I played in, I think one of the really things that shaped me as a musician was when I was 18, when I graduated high school, I toured with my dad, and it was more regional touring, doing a lot of like Peak and Peak and like Rochester area, and doing like gigs in New York, gigs through a little bit of Michigan, and all around Ohio, doing blues, backing them on either blues guitar or blues bass, depending on who we had. And that really kind of shaped me into the gigging musician that I've, since kind of found myself to be. But that was the start of it. I moved to Cleveland after that and had a gig at this place called the Country Club on Lander Road. I was living my own personal shining where I lived at the place I worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really bizarre. I think one like stretch of that, I didn't even have a car at the time or something, like, so I was just there, which was creepy, but also cool and great for shedding. Like, that's where I learned a lot of my self-taught like theory, was sitting there and literally being like, young enough to not be lonely, but old enough to be like alone. So it was one of those things where like I was isolated enough that I could hear better. I just could hear better, and it helped. I like taught my ear a lot more. And there was a guy in the kitchen there who really knew that I was a music fan and loved funk. And he was instrumental at literally grabbing me on a Friday night after our shifts and being like, let's go downtown, or maybe let's go to the Euclid Tavern and see a band, or let's go to P-Funk 7 times this year, or, whatever it was. And that was really what shaped like kind of my playing and set me up to be in all these other bands. Because without that time, I think I would have just probably been more of a couch picker, or maybe just an electronics nerd down the road. Who knows? But that was really instrumental. And if I hadn't had that experience, I couldn't have done any of this other stuff where you walk into a situation and just try to play music as best you can. I would never call it delivering, but you try to stand and deliver. And that was the Chrissy thing. That was just like kind of one-off gig that led to other work, which most gigs are like that. It's like you play one and then maybe it leads to further stuff.
I have a hard time joining bands, like I'm glad that like Todd, the drummer for Boaterhead, he reached out to me and was like, we want you to be our bass player, because otherwise I would not be in a band right now.
Yeah, that dude is so much fun. Like,
oh yeah. I've known Todd. I've known Todd since high school. He likes to tell people we were chemistry partners, and I guess we were in the same chemistry class or something. But
all right, so so very nice.
Right. So we've known each other for a long time. We used to skateboard together and stuff. But if it weren't for him reaching out, I would not be in a band, because I am terrible at joining bands. I'll be like going through ads or whatever on the forums or in Craigslist or whatever, and I'd read something and be like, this sounds perfect. This is the music I want to do. They need a bass player. They got shows going on. This is the perfect band. And then the ad will say, must be willing to rehearse once or twice a week. And I'm like, I'm out.
You're the same, man, in that front.
Yeah. I'm like, I'll show up. Don't worry. You'll give me the songs, I'll show up and we'll be fine. Like, I don't need to. I think a lot of people use band practice as an excuse to get out of their house or away from their significant others or whatever.
You nailed it. Yep, yeah. You nailed it.
And I'm just like, I don't, with the technology today, with, tablature and YouTube and Spotify and all this stuff right here at your computer, I don't want to drive somewhere because where I live, everything is an hour ride. You know what I
Right.
mean? I ain't going anywhere for band practice. It's not going to take me an hour, at least round trip, So, I mean, I'm a half hour to my favorite gas station, So
Madison is an isolated place, which is probably part of why you really love it. But yeah, as far as like functioning to get out on a Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. after working 10 hours.
Right. I get off work at, I'm usually home from work by 4, but in the summertime, we're so busy that I could work till 6 o'clock at night,
Right.
And I work in Western Cuyahoga County, so it takes me an hour to get home. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I work on construction sites and things like that. So I'm dirty and sweaty, so I want to take a shower. And and Boaterhead practices in Akron.
Oh boy. Okay.
So that's an hour and 15 minutes one way. So I'm like, there's no way I can practice on a weeknight. You know what I mean? Like,
being the professional flaker that I can often be, like I honestly, like, to me, this pandemic has really, I was already kind of living in a pandemic when it with regards to certain things. I'm the same way. I don't really necessarily think like a lot of maintenance playing is super important. Like, you should develop that bond and get everything gelling as it is like live, like the core sound. But then after that, like, just shoot me, if you got a line you want me to play, scat it on your phone and send me the memo, and I'll just pick it up.
right.
And I love that about the way that we communicate now as musicians, and definitely during this time in our country, that it's showing people that you can still work on music without getting together.
Yeah, exactly.
And not a lot of people knew that or felt that it was comfortable, but I think now everyone's becoming more comfortable with the concept, and a lot of people have been doing it for years, but it's just really cool to like finally have a legitimate excuse why you're not going to go to band practice.
I don't understand music theory. I don't get scales. I don't understand any of that stuff. I play by I'm going to put my finger here. It's what I call music theory. Not theory, theory. If it sounds right, it is. So I'm going to put right. I'm going to put my finger there, and that's what's going to sound good. So I'm not good at the technical stuff, but I'm really good at improv.
I'm just not a good imitator either. I mean, it's one of those things that, there's a lot of musicians that, or even people in general, like, even if you're doing an impression of somebody, like, if you can copy somebody's mannerisms on their instrument, then all the power to you, but I just can't. And it's one of those things where everything has to kind of come out of my particular Joe Golden Play-Doh extractor, like, you put it in, and no matter what you want, this is how it comes out. Like,
right. You have your style,
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's some of it is a little bit of also not wanting to take on that, I think, even more difficult challenge of really owning somebody else's part, where you're like, I know everything about that, the inflection, not only the note choice and like everything, but the inflection of it, just getting the sound of it. Those are things I don't spend a ton of time on. I just try to, like, I put up the framework to the house and then like hang the pictures later. It's like, just give me the chords. Let me have some structure to it in my brain, and not even theory, but just like, like you said, just where my fingers go. Like, I'm from the 90s school of guitar, which is find the bass note and that's the note, right?
Right. That's the chord you're playing.
That's the chord. That's got to be the chord.
Right.
It's got to be the chord. Which you learn, there's other, hip things you can do, and you start to hear it, though. And arriving at something by hearing it is so much better than arriving at it by being told that it's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, musicians, when you're starting off, I didn't use my ears for a long time. Like, the first 3 years, I wasn't really using my ears, but I was playing and playing out and stuff. It's just, I wasn't connecting the dots on how to really hear. Some people have the knack for it. They're just natural. I personally am not really natural with music. I mean, I have it in my family, but I'm not a quick study on it. It's one of those things I've had to like really stick at to just get to where I'm at with. But I'm kind of with you there. Like, I think it's best to not overanalyze music. Have fun. If you cut loose, that interaction with another musician will almost all the time elevate the music.
I mean, we kind of pride ourselves on being musically accurate.
Yeah, you guys are I would say I would give you a 10 out of 10 on accuracy as a cover band.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, we try to get it to sound as close to the record as we can, but at the same time, that drives me nuts. It's like, why don't people just listen to the record? You know what I mean? So we try to do some things or switch some things up.
Ham it up.
Like, I don't go see, a band to hear them play exactly how they play it on the record. I like when they improv and change things up a bit, so you kind of have to walk that fine line. Like, being musically accurate has got us a lot of accolades in the community. We get a lot of compliments. Our guitar player is fantastic. The keyboard player is one of the best I've ever heard. I get a lot of compliments on playing bass, and I'm terrible with compliments. So I just go, oh, okay, and run away. But
yeah, no, it's always awkward. It is. I mean, there's a part of you that's really pleased to hear it, but it puts you in it's like an instantaneous surprise birthday party.
Right.
And you're just kind of put off guard because you're just like bashful about it. But and I echo what you just said. Like, I think that's why I'm even talking to you now, is I saw your band and was like, this band rules. Like, this band is so much fun. I'm not a person that is real stringent about, like, I mean, I'm definitely watching a band and checking everything out.
Mm-hmm.
And not overly critical about it. Like, I just love live music. Like, it could be anything, and I'm usually on board. But I was really impressed with Motorhead. I don't know. I think that's what really spawned it all. I was like, dude, this band is so much fun. You were accurately nailing everything to the point where it's a serious tip of the hat to it, but still having, like, more of a variety type experience with it too, which is, the medleys were awesome.
Yeah, and that's the you have to still entertain people. You can play the song musically accurate, but you have to be entertaining, and that's, I mean, 90% of that is our singer Chris, who is just outstanding. Like,
he's incredible
and amazing. Like, probably the best front man I've ever worked with. I mean, with the outfits, and that's a guy who can take a completely dead venue and get people, even if it's 3 people, he'll get people up dancing.
Yeah, it is really strange how, I mean, the charisma of the whole band is pretty apparent.
Yeah, but I don't know, it does get taxing as well. Like, the older you get, the things, house is falling apart, the grass is up to my knees, and, well, I can't do anything right now. I got to go play 4 gigs this weekend, But,
yeah. I mean, I am a single man, so I think, a lot of the reason that I found myself 40 and single is because of my music career. There's a lot of times where, not currently right now, but there were a lot of times where it just wasn't an option to,
right.
To move into, like, kind of the secular life, because things were always just moving and changing. And of course, you're working a ton to succeed or make, some money so you can support yourself. So it was, hats off to all these people that have huge families and do this, both husband and wife or one party. And neither of those situations is easier. It's all very difficult. So it's amazing what people can do. Like, humans are pretty amazing creatures.
I guess so.
Well, I don't necessarily feel as bad as I did at the start of the pandemic about all the gig isolation. I missed it, like, just because it was the first time in like 20 years that I got to take a break, and then I got a little sad about it. Like, oh man, wow, you do some inventory at that point. You're like, wow, that's a lot of time I just spent really, really hustling on this. So it's been really, I'm like reaching this like kind of content state with it, where I'm like, okay, the landscape has changed. The music is always there. I mean, I still play every day just to pacify myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's huge. I'm glad that, like, it didn't take the music away from me. It's not like you lost a finger. You just lost your ability to really get in front of to commune with it.
Right.
So I feel fortunate. I do. I was kind of rough. It's day to day, Richard. It's like day to day. Sometimes I'm feeling roughed up about the direction of it. Sometimes I'm like, I needed this. So it's been good. It's been good to kind of walk away from that portion of my life for a little bit and just get back to, like, playing.
Right.
Sit around the house and play a little bit.
Learning things.
I learned a chord. You know, like when was the last time I actively sat down and was just like, you know what, I'm going to teach myself something new today, and not because I didn't want to, it was just busy. So making the best of it is what I'm saying.
Right. That's why we're talking, because of the pandemic and the bars
Yeah,
being closed. I was able to launch a couple of projects, that I wanted to do,
I love that you're doing it. It's really cool what you're doing. I mean, it takes a lot of your time, and it's not for any laurels, but other than to learn what you're doing and also like connect the music community in a time when we're not very connected. So it's
Right,
awesome.
right. That's the whole reason behind this. It's like I see my friends do cool stuff, and I'm like, that to me is more exciting than going to see my favorite band do cool stuff, because you've been doing that cool stuff forever, and everybody knows you do cool stuff, but nobody knows that this dude over here is doing something cool, and he's humble about it, like,
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing too. Is I used to think that certain musicians that were very, very talented were humble when they didn't talk about themselves, and then I realized that that might be true, but they're also just so stinking busy that they don't have time to ruminate about their success.
Right,
They're just going and doing who they are, and with music, it's like an ability thing. So you can't necessarily, like, if you have this great gift and it's as simple as breathing to you to play excellent music, then it's tough to wear that around like a crown when it's just something that's inside of you.
yeah. Yeah.
But it goes both ways, right? We've all seen that stinker that's like really full of himself and you can't figure out why.
Right. But if you're like me, you're just like, I just do what I want. I do stuff because I enjoy doing it and I like doing it, and I don't give a crap if people like it or hate it. I'm not the guy that has 4,000 Facebook followers, because I prefer to be left alone and just do things because I like to do it, But
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. I mean, I do like a little bit of recognition from my peers that I play music with, but when it comes to like, just any kind of people coming up to you and giving you the good graces, it's tough to just say thanks and move on. It just doesn't feel right to me, even, because I'd rather have a conversation. Like, there's so many times that playing where somebody will come up to you and want to give you some praise for a show or an event that they've had, and I immediately want to dispel it with like talking about anything else. And hey, I'm just a person like anybody else. Like, just because I have a piece of wood around my neck doesn't necessarily make me any different. And those stereotypes and tropes and stuff that still exist with music and rock stardom are, obviously the musicians know better. It's the crowd that kind of keeps that particular concept alive, I think.
right.
And because we all know that we're just regular Joes to some degree, and
Well, there's a lot of people in the industry that are in the industry for those accolades and that, you know what I mean? I guess younger kids, that's
absolutely
cool. Younger people, that's cool. When you're 45 and you're gray and you have a big fat belly, you don't care. You're just happy to get out and make some money playing bass. You know what I mean? Like,
also, that's like the punk ethos. Like, there's still some of that. I'm kind of a chill guy, I would say, but like that punk ethos is something that I'm so glad that my music was like, my musicality was shaped by that. If I didn't have that kind of, like, for lack of a better term, that FU stance on, just being intolerant of intolerance or whatever it is, like that's a thing that keeps you happy in music. Even though it seems like a kind of a take on it with like a pent, like you're just pent towards something. It's not like that at all. It actually is like more realistic. I mean, you're not, nobody's blowing smoke up your hoo-ha to get, you to be happy with them or anything like that. You're like, hey, I don't like this. This does not suit me. This is not for me. I'm doing this. Those definitive lines are things that often people can't draw in life, let alone music. So I like it, man. I like that idea. Like,
yeah.
I think you're living a good life because of that particular credo.
Yeah. Having fun anyways.
Right. That's why this feels different than any other interview kind of thing. Not that I get interviewed all the time, but you know what I'm saying? It doesn't feel like it's for your promotion or for my promotion. It's just because we're talking.
Yeah. Because I find you interesting and I want to talk about it.
Well, thank you. I find you interesting as well.
I mean, that's basically it. I don't want to sound like a dick, but I'm just having fun playing with toys, and that's why you're here. you know.
Yes, I love it. I'm glad I can be hot content. Yes.
Right, right. You're giving me an opportunity to mess around with some crap I bought.
That's even better. That's great. At least you're killing two birds with one stone there by making it fun by, getting out in the community still when we're not.
Right.
And, reaching out, getting some people to I haven't met, but I've seen so many people on, like, by you doing this, I'm like, I never knew about this cat. I never knew about this person, So it's just really, really neat to, like, get some information out of it, but also you're learning the curve.
So, I mean, it basically just was like, I want to do a podcast, but I want it to be video, and I don't know what to do. So I started like reviewing guitar reviews, and doing guitar reviews. I'll do my equipment, and in a month when the pandemic's over, I'll sit down with my friends and have them tell stories about their guitars and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But the pandemic did not end in a month,
Yes, sure did. Right.
It's still going. So, yeah, so I was like, now I'm just going to talk to people on the phone, and have them videotape it, and we'll do like an interview type of thing because, I don't know, people do cool stuff and,
Yeah, I do like the gear, obviously, since I'm in the industry and I'm suited for it. Like the whole pedal deal is my father was way into boutique pedals when it hit, so that's where I got like kind of indoctrinated into it. So I found myself in like always being kind of interested in the things that musicians are using. And so it piqued my interest immediately. I was like, first of all, you have a very nice collection of cool instruments that are like well chosen. Not just I got a new guitar today, but like I got this guitar because I wanted a new guitar, but it also is really cool because it's different than anything else I have.
Mm-hmm.
And that interests me personally. So I was on board right away. And working in this gear industry, I've done a ton of talking about our gear at Earthquaker and gear in general. I mean, that shop is constantly 17 different conversations about, gear. Like, what if I got this? And what if I went Eurorack instead of, it's just like all these different concepts of how you can use gear and tools to make music eventually, but it doesn't contain anything about music. It's all about the gear. And I enjoy that. I actually do enjoy that. There's really, it's a matter of opinion, which I like. There's no facts to it. It's just you like it or you don't. That's cool.
Right. Well, Joe, I appreciate you talking with me.
Yeah, anytime I can bore you to death, just let me know.
Well, it wasn't boring at all, man. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this with me, and it's been great. I look forward to putting this video together and putting this one out.
Oh, and my best to Jen too. Thanks so much for the opportunity, man. I really appreciate you.
Not a problem.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Joe. We'll talk to you later.
See you later.
Bye.
My what?
Here he comes again. He's gonna be backing up and backing up again. All my sons, what are they doing? They must be, maybe that church is going out of business and they're gonna empty all the stuff into it. This truck. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
My little hummingbird was just attacked by yellow jackets. Poor thing. Here he goes. Maybe he won't be done. Who's moving?
I don't know.
It's a big truck.
Mm-hmm.
Are you mad at me? Are you wanting me to be quiet?
Well, I am recording. In this episode, I speak with guitar player Joe Golden.
What? You don't like it?
I can't remember what I said in the last one.
How would you want someone to describe you?
As an asshole. I got Joe on the phone and talked to him about his bands, his job, his gear, and... that's stupid. I got Joe on the phone to speak with him about his job, his bands, his time with Chrissy Hynde and the Pretenders, as well as his f***ing mom. I got Joe on the phone to talk about his time with Father God damn it, I fucking sound stupid.